On May 22, 1984, Joseph McMoneagle lay in a lab in the Monroe Institute in Faber, Virginia. Robert Monroe greeted him with an envelope in his shirt pocket. The envelope contained coordinates of different locations and a time period. McMoneagle didn't know that a specific time period was the target. The room was then shut, sealed off with a soundproof door. It was quite similar to a sensory deprivation tank. McMoneagle was told to use the information to project his consciousness to the locations and gather as much information as he could. McMoneagle started to project out to these locations and saw a pyramid-like object in a crater, large carved-out sections of rock that looked like they contained corridors and rooms, a structure akin to the Washington Monument, and even tall humanoid beings. During the session, he was told to go back in time at the location. This is where he encountered the beings. They were around 10 feet tall and looked like they were in the middle of a catastrophe, and almost near extinction of their people. It seems like some sort of solar flare or an unknown cosmic event was causing the catastrophe. They were in these structures to protect themselves, in a hibernation-like state, waiting for others to return. These others were sent out to find a new home for civilization. McMoneagle eventually followed these others to a new planet, full of vegetation, a stark contrast to the dying planet he was just on. This planet too was being ripped to shreds by storms and even volcanoes. However, it was livable. What was McMoneagle seeing? Remote viewing is a process which allows someone to essentially project their consciousness to anywhere they desire. Most remote viewers have handlers that help them through the process and provide specific targets to focus on. It's said that anyone can learn how to remote view, as it's an innate human ability that we forgot how to use, but it does seem like some are more naturally attuned than others. McMoneagle was a non-commissioned officer in the U.S. Army, and eventually was a subject in their Project Stargate program, a program aimed at using psychic spies or remote viewers to help gather intelligence on foreign adversaries. After the session in 1984 was over, the interviewer revealed to McMoneagle that the pictures and coordinates were on Mars, specifically 1 million BC. The images were taken by various Mars mission craft, like the Viking 1 orbiter. It's believed by some that the beings he saw eventually left that planet and came to Earth, giving rise to the human race thousands of years later. Also, his target at the beginning was 1 million BC, and in the middle of the session, he was told to go back even further, so he could have been potentially billions of years in the past. How do remote viewers, remote view? They relax their body and mind and focus on the target at hand, usually images or sets of coordinates which are hidden away from the viewer as to not front-load them with information which could contaminate the experiment. Which means all the information that the viewer is getting is supposed to come directly from their experience. The person leading the experiment should not give any info to the viewer. The location of the targets is kept secret until the end of the experiment. I can only guess that the psychic ability that allows them to traverse space and time also helps their unconscious mind see what the coordinates are. The remote viewer quiets their thoughts to achieve a more neutral state of mind. It seems like they're basically calming their mind to a point where they can receive information, but they're not interpreting or processing it. That's for the interviewer and the subject to do after the session is ended. Then the subject will focus on the target and let the information come to them. They'll get bits and pieces of images, sounds, maybe even tastes and smells, and will piece together these individual clues like a puzzle to try and create a complete picture of what they were experiencing. Analyzing what the remote viewer got right and what they got wrong is imperative to help them learn how to better utilize remote viewing. McMoneagle was a remote viewer for the U.S. intelligence apparatus from 1978 to 1995, with him acting as a consultant in his later years. McMoneagle attributes the start of his journey into the unknown to a near-death experience he had in 1970 while he was stationed in Austria for the Army. He undertook many remote view sessions, one of particular interest being the one where he found a secret Soviet project lurking in the Arctic Circle. The year was 1979. The National Security Council was trying to find a way to look inside a Soviet building that they believed was important. They tasked McMoneagle and a man named Hartley Trent to view the target located north of the Arctic Circle. McMoneagle and Trent described seeing a submarine, quote, a really big one with twin holes. This sub was later confirmed to be real by satellites and was designated the Soviet Typhoon-class sub. They had welded 2 submarine holes together using high-intensity laser technology. According to McMoneagle, the torpedo launch tubes were slanted, so they could fire on the move instead of having to come to a stop to fire, leaving them vulnerable to attack. I couldn't find any info about if this is true or not, so if you know if this is true, please let me know in the comments. Allegedly, this was the biggest submarine created at the time, so it's no wonder US intelligence agencies wanted the scoop on it. McMoneagle has also supposedly remote-viewed alien craft. He stated that he directed himself to the craft and was immediately noticed by them. They were gray aliens, which he calls a sort of biological robot. He claims they kicked him, or his conscience rather, out of the craft. He said he tried several times after, and soon began seeing a flash of a symbol that looked like an upside-down Y. He received this symbol for 6 months while trying to gain access to these crafts. He believes that the Y was symbolizing the corners of an empty box. Maybe he was right, because these Y symbols eventually turned into empty boxes, stacked into different positions. He remembered how his parents got him some toy blocks as a kid that had letters and numbers on them intended to help children learn numbers and the alphabet. Soon, symbols began showing on the boxes. In McMoneagle's head, this information is coming from the ETs and he is supposed to figure out what it means, as a sort of learning experience. The story is very esoteric in nature and is kind of hard to comprehend, but if it's true, it could show the value of interpreting one's remote viewing experience through one's own life experiences. One last experience I want to talk about from McMoneagle is one where he remote viewed a desert. He saw metal rods near a tower and was soon flashed to another location about 200 miles away. He could see a bright light in the distance. He was informed that he experienced the first atomic bomb test at the Trinity test site on July 16, 1945. McMoneagle believes that remote viewers are experiencing the, quote, edges of reality. Nuclear bombs are theorized to rip through the fabric of reality, and McMoneagle thinks that this is why his consciousness was thrown from the location. Nuclear explosions kill your body if you're in the blast radius, but he says that your consciousness can never truly die, and it would die if it were exposed to the nuclear explosion. So the universe has a sort of safety mechanism built in that prevents the consciousness from being destroyed. It begs the question, can we learn more about the universe and the nature of reality from remote viewing? Ingo Swann was another remote viewer and was studied at the Stanford Research Institute by engineer Hal Puthoff and physicist Russell Targ starting in 1972. He was also a Scientologist who attained the operating thetan level of Scientology, which is supposed to help psychic abilities. In 1973, he remote viewed Jupiter and found many things that science had not discovered yet. Tornadoes, rings in the atmosphere, and a mantle composed of hydrogen, all confirmed by probes in the following months and years. Apparently, he also remote viewed Mars, the Moon, and Mercury. What's interesting about the Mars session is that he saw a lot of the same things Joe McMoneagle saw just 24 days earlier. He also saw structures on the Moon, which is corroborated by U.S. Air Force photograph technician Carl Wolf, who in 1965 saw photographs of what looked like buildings on the dark side of the Moon. I think remote viewing is real and does produce results, but it seems like it does take someone trained to really get actionable info from its use. I think natural talent also comes into play extensively. I do wonder about the declassification of the Stargate documents by the CIA though. What were they to gain from the release of this contentious information? They do say that remote viewing didn't work, and that would partly explain why they released the documents, because it wouldn't matter if anyone knew about the program if it didn't work. From the way it's presented, the CIA tried to use psychics to spy on other countries, but it didn't work. This makes the CIA seem goofy and non-threatening. Like, this is what they're up to, playing around with psychics? Maybe that's the point. They're trying to make everyone think that they're just messing around and doing dumb little experiments with psychics. However, remote viewing does seem to work, so maybe they're trying to hide that it works? But why even release the files in the first place? A nagging question I've always had about remote viewing is, how does the subconscious mind, or just the mind in general, decode these coordinates and is able to find them? The location of the coordinates is real, but the coordinates themselves are not. How does the mind connect the set of numbers to a location? What if another culture completely separate from the US, say an uncontacted tribe, had different symbols to represent numbers? Would that person's mind know where to go? If it would, why would it? As with pretty much everything adjacent to remote viewing, like near-death experiences and UFOs, the waters have been muddied, either unintentionally or purposefully. What do you think? Do you believe remote viewing is real? Have you remote viewed? Let me know in the comments. As always, like, subscribe, and comment, as it does help out the channel, and thanks for watching.